In 2022, one of America's most trusted financial software companies quietly agreed to pay $141 million. Not because it lost customer data, not because it got hacked, but because millions of people were told something very simple: your taxes are free. And then they weren't. Over 4.4 million Americans later received compensation. Most of them got around $30 each, which raises a strange question. How does a company built to simplify money end up accused of quietly making free almost impossible to actually find? And even more importantly, why did it take journalists, not regulators, to notice it? Because the answer doesn't start in a courtroom. It starts with a kitchen table in 1983, and a frustration that would eventually reshape how America files taxes. Scott Cook wasn't building an empire. He was watching his wife struggle to balance a checkbook. That small moment becomes the origin of Intuit. Alongside Tom Prue, he builds Quicken, one of the first tools designed to simplify personal finance for everyday people. And it works. People don't just use it, they rely on it. By the early 1990s, Intuit is no longer a startup. It's becoming financial infrastructure. Then comes the move that changes everything. In 1993, Intuit acquires Chipsoft for $225 million. Chipsoft owns TurboTax. Now, something powerful happens. Quicken tracks your money. TurboTax handles your taxes. Together, Intuit is no longer a software company. It becomes the system sitting between Americans and their financial life. By the 2000s, TurboTax isn't just popular, it's default behavior. But dominance always creates a second problem. Control attracts pressure. Because in the background, the IRS still offers something called free file, a government-backed way to file taxes at no cost. And if that becomes easy to use, the entire private tax industry weakens overnight. So a fragile balance forms. Government access on one side, private software dominance on the other. And for years, that balance holds. Until people start asking a simple question: why does free keep turning into paid? Here's where the system becomes less obvious. It doesn't rely on lying. It relies on friction. Imagine two paths inside the software. Both start the same way. You click free to file. You enter your information. Everything feels normal. Then the system slowly shifts. A deduction appears, then a warning, then a suggestion. Upgrade to avoid mistakes. Upgrade to maximize your refund. None of these statements are technically false. That's the key. This isn't deception through lies. It's persuasion through structure. The free path still exists, but it becomes harder to stay on it. More uncertainty, more warnings, more pressure. And in behavioral terms, uncertainty is expensive. So users do something predictable. They click upgrade and move on. But the deeper issue wasn't just the interface. It was what investigators later found in the background. A technical decision that changed everything. Search visibility. Reports suggested that pages linked to free filing were structured in ways that made them harder to find through search engines. Not removed, not deleted, just buried. And that detail changes the entire interpretation, because now the question is no longer, what did users experience? It becomes, was that experience designed? At first, it looks like noise, forum posts, customer complaints, random frustration. I thought it was free. Why did I get charged? Individually, nothing holds weight. But then journalists at ProPublica begin connecting the pattern. Military users eligible for free filing are redirected. Low-income users qualify for free filing, but end up paying. And the pattern becomes too consistent to ignore, because at scale, randomness stops looking random. It starts looking engineered. And that's when regulators begin to shift attention. To understand this, you have to zoom out. The US tax system is not fully public. It's a hybrid. The IRS defines rules, but private companies execute most of the experience. That creates something unusual. The regulator depends on the industry it regulates, and the industry controls user experience of government programs. That overlap creates slow, structural drift, not corruption in the simple sense, but alignment failure. Over time, government sets rules, industry shapes access. Users experience the gap, and unless someone maps the system end to end, no single piece looks illegal, only fragmented, until journalism connects it. Then everything escalates. State regulators open investigations. The FTC steps in. The allegation is direct: companies advertising free filing while steering many users into paid tiers. Then comes the ruling. A federal administrative judge finds the advertising deceptive. That moment is critical, because now it's not interpretation, it's legally recognized behavior. The response follows quickly. Deceptive advertising, banned disclosure requirements, enforced, settlement begins, final outcome. $141 million settlement, millions of users compensated. But the biggest consequence isn't the money, it's what happens next. The IRS begins building its own direct filing system, a government-run alternative. No third-party software required. And for Intuit, that is the scenario it spent decades trying to prevent. Not fines, competition. Zoom out, and the numbers look abstract. Millions of users, hundreds of millions of dollars. But zoom in, and it looks different. A family expecting a refund, a user paying for something they thought was free, a system that feels slightly harder than it should. None of it feels dramatic in isolation. That's why it lasts so long, because the impact is distributed, not concentrated. And distributed systems are the hardest to see breaking until they are mapped. Inside systems like this, nothing needs to feel malicious. Each step is rational on its own. A warning improves accuracy. An upgrade increases confidence. A prompt reduces errors. But layered together, they produce direction, not neutrality. This is how modern digital systems drift, not through one decision, but through thousands of small optimizations, each one defensible, each one incremental, until the outcome no longer matches the original intention. And by then, the system is already stable. Intuit didn't start as a system of extraction, it started as a system of simplification. But scale changes incentives, and incentives reshape design. What begins as help can slowly become control over navigation, not through force, through structure. And the most important question isn't whether one company did something wrong. It's what happens when essential public functions rely on private systems whose incentives are only partially aligned with public access. Because when that gap grows wide enough, correction doesn't come from inside. It comes from pressure, from journalists, from regulators, and eventually from new systems replacing old ones. Not because everything collapsed at once, but because it became impossible to ignore any longer. And that's usually how modern financial systems change. Quietly, then all at once.